Welcome to The Business Behind Your Business, the podcast where we delve into the financial strategies and insights that drive success for small and medium-sized business owners. I'm your host, Paul Sweeney, and in each episode we bring you expert guests who share practical advice, real-world experiences, and actionable tips to empower you on your business journey. Whether you're a seasoned entrepreneur or just starting out, get ready to uncover the secrets to success and gain valuable insights into the business behind your business. Welcome back to The Business Behind Your Business. I'm excited today because I've got a wonderful guest lined up who's going to really shed some light on the topic of how you promote your business by storytelling, but promoting using video. And look, we've heard a lot about audio and testimonial and SEO and just your website marketing, your social media, but video, that visual presence is such a key thing. So delighted today to have Dave Power from Power Creative joining us. And look, Dave's been doing this for a very long time, for 25 years at least. So he knows what he's doing. He's worked with a lot of small business, a lot of large business, locally, internationally. But Dave, I know you've got some stories to tell, but the thing we wanted to talk about today is that idea of storytelling. So Dave, it's great to have you on the podcast. Welcome. Is there anything else that I missed in your bio that we need to raise at this point?
No. Thank you so much for the intro, Paul, and appreciate you having me on to talk about all the topics that we're covering today. And it is kind of how far do you go when you start discussing these things, and like you say, a lot of the challenges that most businesses have is getting out of their own head. So that's where we come in. We make it easier for them by basically letting them brain dump their thoughts. And instead of doing that with automation in ChatGPT, actually getting your brain dump through some people that can understand and dilute that, and then put that into a workable plan.
Mm-hmm. Because I think, look, the thing I always say to business owners is that they're the expert in their business, but they need to work with the experts in other aspects of the business. And today we're in a very visual, a dynamic way of promoting ourselves. It's not a case of we can open the door and just expect business to come to us. We need to be out there. We need to be demonstrating our value, demonstrating our capability, but also demonstrating the trust that our customers have put in place for us, or having us in what we do. And the best way I've seen to do that is through video. So, what are some of the things what are some of the key benefits that we should be getting when we're looking for promotion?
Yeah, well, I think one of the big decision makes early on in the process is around, are you camera facing, or are you perhaps looking at other avenues to promote yourself? And I think I often start there because not everyone wants to be in front of the camera, and not everyone has to be. Depending on the size of the organization, there's representatives within that organization, whether they've got a comms department, a marketing manager, or somebody else perhaps who can play that role, or paid talent even, depending on who you're talking to. So one of the key things really is knowing who the audience is and what video is right, because there's endless amounts of content type of video. And so there's no right or wrong rule with that. Take Jerry Harvey. He's happy to be the person that speaks, in all of the Harvey Norman commercials. At least he was for a long time. I don't know if that's necessarily current today. But, Bing Lee's an example. Yenda Lee, now that Bing Lee's passed, you always hear her on the radio and in the advertising. And it's really about, are you the face and the brand of your business, or do you need to look at other avenues? And if you do want to be the face of the business, you need to be media trained. You need to be ready. You also need a professional set of assets around you to bring that together, and you can't just wing it. People do, and they might be okay, but there's a big risk that they might also run some reputation damage in the process.
You would say I dabble in my online presence with my YouTube videos and even the recordings of the podcast. One of the reasons I started a podcast was I had a good head for radio. So moving into audio, into video is a bit of a shock to the system. But I think we often see those polished videos out there, and we forget that the guys doing those polished videos, like your Mr. Beast and your Sean Cannells and all those guys, started with some really ordinary stuff. So if you've only got one shot at it, you really should be using somebody like yourself, somebody that's experienced.
Yeah, and also, the stuff that's self-generated versus the paid content that you're having someone produce for you, there's two different schools of thought, really, because myself included, I'll do a lot of just ad lib even before I've come onto this recording with you. I did a quick behind the scenes of my setup, which I often do on most projects, to say, here's what I've done today, this is the purpose of today, and here's where it's going. And for me, that sort of content, you could say, is disposable content. It's not going to be there forever on your pages, but it's going to be here and now. It's about what you're doing. And so different organizations are going to have different strategies around that. There's no right or wrong approach to it, but it's how much of that ad lib versus how much of that curated, planned content there is. And that's the balance. But we can help a lot of clients in deciphering that. And just come up with a game plan so that whilst they're creating their own content, we've also got some strategy around, that longer lasting content, the higher polished content that's going to maybe sit on the website, be that lead gen, funnel builder, or service and product demonstrator, and all those sorts of details. So there's a whole long list of the polished content that you could go down. But I think the key is for anyone who's watching this, don't tackle it all at once. Don't try and in-house everything, because there's only so much time in the day that you can do it, myself included for my own business. There's only so much content I can create of me and what we do, other than what I'm producing for others, So if you're in your business getting distracted from what your key operation is by getting distracted on content, you might be dropping the ball on something more crucial, that is your big money earner. So it's about that balance, and it's about setting some budgets and some goals.
Yes, that's some great advice there in terms of focusing on the core or the essential actions that you should be taking in your business. I know it's very easy to go down the rabbit hole, the excitement trap of creating content and creating videos and audio, and but it can take you away from those key revenue activities. So that is a key thing, focusing. And it's good to hear that somebody who's involved in producing content for a living is mindful of that trap themselves. Look, I know I have seen some of your behind the scenes footage on your Instagram and Facebook, and it's actually really interesting to see all the different steps that are involved in actually producing that final content, because a lot of people just think, Dave's just going to turn up with his camera and his microphone and a few lights, make me look great, and away we go. But, even the steps, the walkthrough of where are we going to film this, what's the lighting like, who are we actually talking to, what are they going to say, there's a lot of steps. But I want to go back one step prior to that. You mentioned talking about that whole planning process. Planning seems to be the key thing, because a lot of quality time spent planning is going to save you at the end of the day, I believe.
Well, exactly right. And if you go in without a plan, it's different if you're doing event capture, which I do a lot of, and they've already planned out that event and there's an event manager involved, and all I'm doing is turning up and actually, capturing what they've already curated, I suppose. Even then, though, there's still some strategy that needs to come into play around what needs to be captured, what's the shot list, and who are the people that are the stakeholders or customers attending that event, and what are we capturing? What are we producing at the end of it? Is it a 2-minute reel? Is it a 20-minute sit-down interview with someone? Like, there's all these variables. And so planning is huge, and taking it away from events and then thinking about general content for other purposes in marketing and education in business. Really, it's about understanding what those messages are on the planning front. And rather than Dave coming in and trying to understand that, even though I do have a general understanding of it, I bring in writers that actually have that skill set, the journalistic approach to come in and go, right, what is the angle? What is the story? And if you think about the journalists, what they do for any, traditional media, they're creating it for a format, whether it be written or TV or radio. And so what they're doing is understanding, well, here's where it's going. It's going to live on the website, or it's going to live on the web and social media. What is the ideal attention of that audience member to take in this message? And are we going to spend, there's all those numbers that we know from social media, 30 to 60 seconds. Website, people are going to spend longer because they're researching you. So it's about repurposing that content and knowing exactly how long you want to go into the backstory. And I think one thing that you and I mentioned when we started our discussion about talking today is the origin story. And that came up in particular for one client recently who's been in business for 50 years as a third generation business in the wealth management sector. And for them, they wanted to pay tribute to it, but they also didn't want to make it a history lesson. And you see that happen sometimes with organizations that have 100 or 200 years background, and sometimes it's relevant. Look, if you're at an event and they're playing the big history piece about an organization, you've got a captured audience who are seated and being fed and wined and dined. Maybe you can get away with that sort of content. But for those viewers who are online, that needs to have its own space on the website as a history piece, but not necessarily, on social media and other places where your attention span is just so short for the viewer that it probably won't stand, unless it is a tribute piece when someone's passed or something like that, to thank that person for the legacy. So there's a lot of approaches. Again, no right or wrong. It's just a matter of weighing it up and saying, well, how much of the backstory do we want to go into about this organization, and how important is it to today's viewer? And is it going to be relevant to their decision making going forward in working with that organization?
So we mentioned the origin stories coming through and that history, which is great to show, I guess, the experience and the journey so far. What are some of the things that we should be including in, say, the story about who we are now and how we're going to provide great value for our customers?
Well, I think on that, it's all about the current customers you're serving. And, we do a lot of testimonial pieces and case studies, whichever way you want to brand that. They're kind of the same thing. Who is that customer that you've served and how have you served them? What is the outcome of working together? And really highlighting, I suppose, all the achievements and the goals that were set out in the process is such an important element to capture. And again, taking, my hat off from being the guy doing that for everyone else, I've started doing the same thing for me recently. Only just this year, in fact, I finally got around to capturing, after 13 years as Power Creative, some clients of my own who have said positive things many a time on the phone and an email. It's like, well, why aren't I capturing that content? And, the content that I've got out of that and the substance of that content, and not needing to script heavily, but just go in with some good Q&A strategy around, what is it that we worked on and how have we achieved the goals, have just created this amazing wealth of content for me to share. So any business can do that. It's just about working out who your top customers are or who your ideal customers are. And then it's just a matter of getting them all together. Or, and this is where cost comes into it, do you go to each customer and do you consider featuring their space and, highlighting, I guess, a little bit more about them? So that's not so you-centric, because you're really talking about how you've played a role in their business. And I feel like you need to be showcasing how that's affected their day-to-day running. But that's where we can come up with strategies for the client and say, all right, well, there's 3 customers, let's do one a day, or there's 3 customers, let's get them all in here to record like we are right now in a set space. And then off we go to shoot some B-roll cutaways of what it is they do. And for those who aren't sure what those terms are, that's basically shots of people doing things, shots of product, shots of location. that goes over top of people speaking, so that we're not always looking at someone on camera, but we're actually hearing what they're referring to. So yeah, there's a lot of that detail that I suppose, again, going back to your planning and strategy meeting, and I start every client conversation with that discovery call to work out what their objectives are. It's just about working out which customers you really think are going to be the ones singing your praises. Obviously, don't pick the customers that it didn't go well with. That goes without saying. But also, comfort level of the customer talking on camera will come into it as well. You will unfortunately have some that are just like, no, I'd never do that. Sorry. Or they can't say it because it's IP related, or, there's some important reason why they can't partake in a case study. But there's just a wealth of gold there that is just literally worth, looking into for anybody. And the other thing I should point out there is that you probably don't want to do that yourself. And the reason I say that is, if you're there interviewing your customer about how well you did, it's going to come through a little bit contrived. Whereas if you've got a third party, enter Power Creative, subtle plug, you will basically get a different result. And I can guarantee you it's going to be a better result. And the reason, apart from just our approach in filming and editing and the rest, it's the key ingredient of having someone that's actually thought through about what it is that we're getting from these customers, and not being so close to the customer that you end up being emotionally attached. And you can just segregate yourself and go, right. And if you do want to attend on the day of shooting, great. Be the client-facing, handshaking, customer relationship, but don't play the role of the interviewer, because it's hard. And I tell you, it's hard because there's certain things that we'll ask them to do maybe more than once. And if you have to do that as a business owner, you're going to just be like, oh, well, let's just get this done and move on. And you're going to get a different result.
Mm. Yeah, there's a lot of value in actually getting somebody in independent. I think the client will probably be a bit more candid about just how much you have worked for them, because sometimes they sort of withhold a bit of the, the praise at times. Maybe they don't want to tell you what a great job you did as much. I'm not sure why, but I have seen that. But I think, look, what I'm hearing a lot from here is there are some skills here. And I think we're told by a lot of things that we can learn this skill, we can become this videographer, we can become this social media guru, etc. But there is a skill. There is definitely an art, and you should tap into somebody else's skill. Don't try and be them, but use them to grow your business.
It goes for me as well. I don't ever rely on only my skill set. I bring in a team for the client that suits their project and budget. And the reason for that is that, I can't be a pocket knife. I have to have all the different, team members who provide their certain skill set. And there's also there's a lot of niches in this industry. And yes, you do have your all-rounder videographer that a lot of people refer to, but I usually steer away from the term videographer when it comes to myself, because I feel like as a producer, the idea is that you're pulling strings. You're not necessarily always hitting record. And what that means is you're letting the others who are great at what they do around you come to the table and provide their input, and then end up with a better result. And any TV production and Hollywood production, not that every client has to have that budget, but if you've got a team around you to work on things, you can see the result and the difference that it makes.
And you're going to get a high quality output, I think, particularly if you're engaging people who have got, if you hire skills better than what you are in that area. Somebody once recently said to me that you should never hire somebody where you've got to train them to do the job. If you're hiring them to be the marketing person, you want somebody who is a marketing expert, and they're going to create value for you. You don't want to be there, basically buying a dog and doing all the barking yourself. And
the risk there as well for a lot of others in the industry that I've seen, without, putting anyone down, but just saying maybe they've taken on more than what they should have. They've double handled, well, multitasked things is probably the way to say it. Or they've hired below, like you say, as well, and maybe that result hasn't been what everyone was hoping for. And I've had that come to me as feedback that people have said, look, we've seen something go horribly wrong. We don't want that to happen again. We've learned our mistake. Can you please help? And we're always happy to come in and oblige to that. But there needs to be a discussion first around goals and scope and budget, because otherwise you can't just switch companies and hope that result will be different if you've gone and perhaps, scope something a bit less than what you really need to be putting into the kitty to actually make that work. And there's a lot of people that I think in this industry who are very passionate, and I'm one of those people, but there's also an element of running a business, and you need to understand that certain things can't be cut in the corner, and that you really need to have all those things, in check, so that you really don't run that risk. And I often refer to having the planning stage or the writer interviewer as an insurance policy on your video, because essentially without that, what they're doing is hoping that they get their message on point in-house. And even though they've spent, let's say, $3,000 to $10,000 on filming some content with me, if they've opted not to use anyone in the writing and the interviewing or any of that direction, unfortunately, they run a huge risk of that 3 to 10K being worthless. And it's not about how you film it. It's not about how you light it. It's all about what that message and what the content strategy is.
So messaging, really important. So now, Dave, just to revisit, you work with people on a range of different budgets. Obviously, what you can do for them varies depending on the budget, because that limits the amount of work that you can actually contribute. But where is the best place to start if you're looking to do this?
And this is something that comes up a lot. And I think in the past, what I've got caught out on myself is quoting everything to spec. And even though I'd like to give someone a very specific quote of their exact brief, something that I've done recently on my website is, and you're probably seeing this come through on Reels on LinkedIn and Instagram and Facebook and TikTok for those on there as well, is I'm educating about this process and also publishing a lot more about pricing models. I never used to, but I think it's important because I've, going back to that point of seeing things go wrong when people cut corners, or maybe just conversations that sort of don't ever go anywhere because people don't know what they don't know. So rather than picking up the phone and going, where do we start? You can go to the website, look at pricing models. You can see your 3, you can see your 5, you can see your 9K price ranges, but then you can also see higher end stuff, 20, 30K up. And, they don't necessarily, they're not a shopping list to say, here's what you get for that money. What they are is a starting point for that person's conversation. And if you're a startup that, doesn't want to be investing over $10,000, then, the lower categories are for you. If you're someone that's an organization that, has a long record of running in business and you want to level up, you probably need to look at the other budgets. But for me, it's like, well, let's start there. Let's look at some case studies and some examples of my own, see what others in the field have done that relate. But also, rather than making it all about me and what I've generated, what have they seen in the market that is working for their competition? And where do they want to be against that competition? And then we start the conversation about, well, how do we approach this? And what sort of budget should we be looking at? And I think on budget as well, not to make it exactly like a building budget, but when you think of building a house, there's going to be variables. And some projects that have a lot of moving parts might be like that because you don't know what you don't know until you get there. And the reason I say that is if you are looking at, picking up several customer case study videos and you're ready to roll out a whole lot, there's a lot of moving parts in whether or not that person will be available today or tomorrow, or do we have to come on several days instead of one day? So be prepared to add percentage allowances in your budget, and don't set a really hard, firm budget. You're not negotiating on a used car sales yard. What you're actually doing is forecasting, I suppose, for your own benefit and for a rainy day of what you're producing in that content.
Well, that's great. I think, some really wise advice there, and also not just about the whole video production and storytelling, but also some great tips about how you plan, or I guess any aspect of promoting your business and thinking through that process. I know on your website, and I have taken a look at it and thought that was pretty impressive. You've got a lot of the stages built out of what people should be considering at each stage. Some really useful tools there. So I encourage our listeners to jump onto powercreative.com.au. We'll put the link in the show notes, but have a look at that. There's some great material there. And also have a look at some of the work that Dave and his team have been doing. And the results there are amazing, quite clear, very professional, I must say. But also, knowing you come across as a very approachable guy. So
thank you.
Lovely to work with. So
And on that point about the processes on the page, up until the last week, that was all text. The guy who doesn't build his own home, I was that guy, and it was one of those things where I went, this is confusing. I'm visiting my own website and I'm confused. So unfortunately, I think, and I've been fortunate enough to pick up a lot of work without needing that website per se, but I've probably missed a lot of potential clients out of it. So you've got to think about, and, every business is going to be different. What is the customer experience like when they go and visit your website? And how are you telling them that story? And I think if you visit our processes page in particular, like you say, it breaks it down into all the various steps that one could consider when they're producing this content. And literally until last week, I think it was all in my head. And it's worked for this long, but, we're getting to a point now where people want to do their homework at night and not talk to you about it, and then they're going to come to you the next day. So I finally caught up, everybody, but it took me a while. We got there.
Oh, that's great. So it's a great news that you get your customer experience telling your story on your website, on your socials, but as Dave has learnt, get that knowledge out of your head. And maybe you're not the guy to do it, but just get that out of your head and let somebody like Dave or somebody creative who can come up with a polished result for you, let them put it on your website, let them put it into a format that your potential customers are going to see it and think, well, yeah, I want to do business with you.
That's right, definitely. And really appreciate the opportunity to talk with you today.
Oh, it's been fantastic to have you on. I've actually made a number of notes as we've been talking, because there's some absolute pearls of wisdom in there, particularly about planning. And I think, look, the whole idea of planning, we often rush into things as business owners, and we think, well, we can see this guy on the internet doing it. We can be like that, but the reality of it is that guy on the internet, he's gone through and done a lot of this planning stages. You just don't see it. It's like the duck paddling on the water. But you've really highlighted, the process, but also the benefits there. I can see those benefits coming through, and it's just a great eye-opener about how we should be using it correctly to tell stories, to tell our customer experience, to tell our prospects how they can benefit from working with us.
Well, a pleasure sharing it with you. And, it's an ever-evolving space as well, is the other thing to remember here. For me as well, clearly only a week on from changing my own website. So don't get complacent that everything's sorted and set and forget. I think we need to evolve as the times evolve.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, once again, Dave, thank you for your time. Thank you for your wisdom that you've shared, and thanks for telling us about your story and how you've helped other businesses tell their story through video. Thank you very much.
You take care.
That's a wrap for this episode of The Business Behind Your Business. We hope you found today's discussion insightful and valuable for your business journey. Before we go, don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on your favourite platform. Share it with fellow business owners who could benefit, and send in your burning questions, because we love hearing from you. Missed any of our previous episodes or looking for additional resources to help grow your business? Head over to our website at thebusinessbehindyourbusiness.com. There you'll find our full archive of past episodes along with show notes, transcripts, and links to valuable resources mentioned in each episode. Your journey to business success continues at thebusinessbehindyourbusiness.com. Until next time, stay inspired, stay informed, and keep building the business of your dreams.